Okay, now we're entering part two on this, showing you the artifacts and a little bit more about this place known as Kortic Tepe, which appears to be over 12,000 years old at its earliest dating that we have so far at this point in its archaeology. Just like Gobekli Tepe has only been partially excavated, so to figure out whether it's older or younger on these different places that are attached to it that haven't been excavated would be something else. I mean, it could be at the same time, could be a little earlier, could be older. There's already indication that there's a spread of time that's going on here, so that could become quite interesting and see how uh, the longevity of it basically, but also how old it does go back, because they thought Gobekli Tepe was the big dog on it all, and it somewhat is, or the thoughts on what's left up under the ground is. But as they've started doing these other sites, they go, wow, there's some stuff over here that's real important. Here are these people that are working these stone bowls like crazy, and it's amazing. And look at these scratches that are exactly the same distance apart, like on the left. Like somehow this is done. Whenever you tried to do something like this, that you wouldn't be able to keep a straight line in it. And then if you've got to cut it into stone like that, you're going to have to go over and over and over and over in that spot somehow and get it down to that level. And then to end up being uniform with all the lines, but you didn't go without the lines and you didn't go outside the lines. There's no waver, it looks like, whatsoever. You'd be kind of proud of that once you got through with it. How long would that take? Figuring how long it takes to make the cup in the first place, then to blacken it and do the other things that we see on it right there. It's pretty amazing. There are crosses, and three of them, on the right hand side, showing you that the idea of the three is probably evident with these people, but then other times there are just two, and this looks like a pair of people, but that seems to be, well, 1/4 swastika starting to swoosh. But that's just an interpretation off of it, but it does look like a symbology that hooks up with it. And this is the way this place looked here, and you can see these walls that are making it up, and they're somewhat organic at this point. They're not squared off at all, but then there are other square walls that connect them to where they were making the dwellings somewhat rounder, probably due to the way that they do the roofs. And then the connectors are still straight on in a grid-like form. In your top right-hand corner, there's a mace head there in white, but the other parts that are there are used to straighten out arrows and things along that line that these people had going on. Top left is one of those stone bowls. No, it's not pottery. Kind of looks, no, 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 it's not pottery. That's stone. How thick is it? About a 1/4 inch, but down in there at the bottom over there, it gets about a 1/2 inch thick. But you can see how deep these people are at this site in the bottom left-hand corner and what they have to go through. And they're taking a 20-foot ladder and putting it in there, and there's only sticking it out not much, huh? Like if they go any deeper, what are they going to do? Start pulling you out with a crane? Take down the parts that are next to them and start crawling over there in levels where you go down here and then you go down there and you're still digging, but then you're going to have to go through all of this. So there's amazing stonework here, and again, I have to say it one more time, as if you hadn't heard me yet. This is not pottery in any way; it's stonework. So it's almost like, well, you think the bricks is the last thing, where they start out with straw, then they have wood, then they go with bricks. In the idea, like Three Little Pigs, whereas it seems like we had bricks a long time ago, everybody looking at Sumerian stuff, but then you go, we had solid stoneware before that works pretty incredible. Of course, I made the comment of a video like 2.5 years ago, if y'all have seen it, on Fred Flintstone and his amazing stoneware, this, that, and the other. Showed little clips of cartoons and stuff. They got flagged, remember? Well, they got flagged and I got to keep it on, but I don't get to make any monetization off of it. And I don't even know if I had it on. Usually whenever I nab something that's known like that, I try not to put it on so they won't try to flag it over it, but then they can still flag it and get monetization off of it. And I have no control over it if I leave it on, so sometimes I have to throw it out. But that's neither here nor there. So here are these different shapes, and you can tell they're somewhat unique that are on these. But somebody made the comment on the ones that are in Egypt that are all made like this a long time ago that, I mean, this is hundreds of years ago from now, that in looking at them, this is no hundreds of years ago, but it's over 100 years ago. It's somewhere in 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. So somewhere right in there, a guy had made a comment that when he looked at those, he knew there was something up, that was more outstanding, just like the other Egyptologist that had come before him and the person that found him and everything had indicated off of it. And this idea of drilling, so there's something going on that we really didn't even have figured into this concept. It's so early. But on top of that, too, these stone bowls that are there, he said that some of these are a little different in size, but I have a stinking suspicion that if I was to fill this up with grain and pour it in the other one, it would be exactly full. Almost like there's 16 ounces and they're all 16-ounce cups, but one is a little wider and lower, one's a little this, one's a little that, but they're almost made to volume, but they wouldn't let him prove it with grain nor water, and that there was a standard that was there. And I deduced from that a lot of these urns that are made with pottery that they have are made to keep a certain type of volume, but also there may have been some sacred bowls in there that could give you a volume type that work off of it. But in the ancient of days, they were trying to make them where they held about the same amount, regardless of what their size were due to the stone they worked with. Just a thought. But then we also have the idea that, cat bomb, we have the idea that down here in the bottom picture there's one that's done not square, but it's a square. It's a bent square. It's like arched and flat faces onto it and everything. And this was done with stonework. You can imagine the difference that goes on whenever you make something like that than what would go on with the other pottery pieces is here. It's amazing that goes on, and then you can see that scratched and burnt idea where it goes on and where it has this little edging that goes around it that's darker and everything. Quite amazing. These pieces that are almost like mace heads and so on, and it looks like this bottom piece is mimicking an urn type of thing that you see in Egypt with a pointy end on it well after this point that you could open up somehow, and it would be a big thing, would hold a lot of stuff in it. But it's this little type of thing here, and it's got an extra little nipple knob on the end of it on the right and so on, and a sectionetted middle piece. Looks kind of odd. And there's just wavy lines on all of it, like somebody spent a large amount of time with that. And then, of course, we have all these little pinules that have been smoothed down that's right here that people think are somewhere in between a phallic object and something used to do other things and objects off of it. Or maybe these are out of the harder stone, so they were used to start off and peck things with. A myriad of ideas at this point. I'm not sure if they can get that down to a zero, because I think most of these didn't look like they had been used recently for working, and then these are the ones that are thrown away and not used anymore. So what's missing, or is there something missing, and so on like that. And these different points looks like they have peck heads onto them and so on, but a lot of times the peck head will have a mouth on it. And is this just symbolic, or was this not even used or anything like that, but it was used symbolically and so on? And of course everybody's going to revert to these ideas. Hey, you remember I talked about, hey, there was this one table we were looking at? Well, here's another table of this stoneware that's here, and then ones that kind of match it in their little concepts, where this one's like that and that one's like this and so on. And all of these were pretty much broken, but stuck back together. There's only, a small percentage of which that are not broken in any way, shape, or form, and most of them are multiple shatters. But it covers this whole table. Well, the back right part area is a bunch of mates heads, but then there's little dishes and things in the back left-hand part of it there coming up to the front, and then there's all those little things like over here at the left that are shown there, and then more stonework that's here, kind of separated by ideas and concepts that are here. And hey, look, this bowl looks kind of like that bowl, but ain't none of it perfect. But then again, they were all made to uniform size, basically, and so on, and depth, and whatever you want to say about it also. And people have made connections that there's a Harappan civilization. Now, if you want to go with that ancient aliens, I guess I'll touch upon it here. They have all these heads that look anamorphic somewhat, and these people are all pulled back. They have these slit eyes and strange things. There's a helmet that looks like a beak down there in the bottom left-hand corner has on it, and so there might be something like a bird worship. Right over here in Azerbaijan, there appears to be something that looks like a frog or a frog-legged person. There's the Anunnaki, but it's in the bottom right hand corner, but that's actually something from earliest Harappan and India civilizations, which shows you another connection we talked about in other videos and don't need to do it. But that's hooked up mainly, we looked at so far, to the Ubaid culture, but then we have the Harappan civilization over here to the right. these people that have antler heads onto them, and people that first had come and helped with civilization and so on, and things are connected to them, and I guess that's as far as we need to go on it. But then, of course, there's these scorpion people and things that are shown here in the Ubaid period, and a lot of people have made the connection that it's astrotheological, and that's probably what these wasps are, because there's just a large contingent of them that are here, along with snake symbology and all kinds of things. And hey, if you look down here on the right, there's all these mace heads and everything else, but there's a rib cage right there in the middle right of it. And once they got to that point and realized that's a femur coming out the bottom part, and oh wow, this is a skull, they had that checked out. So maybe they can genetically get something out of this. It's possible with our modern form that we find, and the way that before we looked at it and we would go, well, I don't know, it's not changed from a modern day too much, so it must be, oh, it's just something's wrong with it, we'll throw it out. No, that might actually be a little bit more rational, but they know now by looking at it how they can tell if it's older or if it's more modern due to the way that it lays out. And if they put a replicator on it, they can get a few larger strands, and the computer can try to put it together for you and give you an idea, because it knows certain areas that things are in. And here we go. But there's other snake symbology, like on the pot that's there, and it has a weird shape to it too that's on there, and it almost has like a heel that's on it and some separation that goes on onto it, and these scratch patterns that go on here that we see much later than this and don't give credit for, but they're looking at this and they go, this is 10,600 right here, and they had it going on. In fact, here's these needles that they have, and you look at the one on the right and you go, well, that's a big old needle, that must punch through, you know, cow hides and all kinds of things like that. What's the one on the left? Well, they already had fabric and things like that going on, and lighter wear, and they're using that for stitching and all these type of things, and it's a bone needle. In fact, they have a few of them that we can probably give you a little better close-up here, but they've got them sitting in cotton. And here's a group of them, where even at the far left are fishhooks, by the way, and they're a little thicker in the catch or the arch of it here, almost looking like Maui's one that we talk about much later. It really has a look like that. In fact, I think there's one in this group that is like, tell me what you think that looks like. But all these other artifacts that are shown here, and a lot of those are made out of stone, but some of these things are made out of bone. But there is no pottery artifact that goes on there. In fact, here we are digging up another portion of a human body, so I'm wondering if we can get any DNA or anything out of them. That'd be real interesting. It would show you level of people and what's going on, but who they're connected to and so on. And they already have some of the Natufian DNA and stuff, so it'd be easily to make a good confirmation, although I think they've covered it already, because everything you see here you can see later. There are mace heads in early Egypt and in Sumeria. You know, it just starts, and if you'll go ahead and put that on a list and start going down through it, you'll get things that are either direct clones of each other, or this means that, that means that to these people, but they both have it, which shows you other connections. But that's not what this video is really for, because we got down to this point here, and there's another body that's up here in this, and that one rock in the rock, that's a skull. And so they have a few of these burials that are done in the ground in the situ, like we find much later. And sure, there's obsidian work and things like that that they find too, so it's not like they're only working this one type of stone. They're using flint and obsidian and find different things, but they also seem to be working certain types of stone, and then if they find any type of stone that's got a color that can be usable, you'll see that somewhat. So here's the pit looking down into it too, and so you can see the level here in the bottom right, and almost by seasons how they've gone through this, and then you see that darker, more moist level that by next season will be all dried out and it won't look like that. Go a few feet into it and it will. And so here's an overhead layout of the places they've gotten so far, but you can also see all of these square like images that are in that sand, showing you that every place that has one of those has a whole little dig that goes on with it, and dwellings and so on that's hooked up with it. And here they are going through the layers, seeing what they can find and being real meticulous. So finding things like that. But there's this field here of these column type things, and again, people have said, well, if you stacked a few of these upon each other, it'd probably make more sense than what we're seeing today. But it's very possible that they knocked them over beforehand. The strange thing is they're all stood up like the column base. And in the other site here associated with all these sites, we've seen that one room that they have where the pillars are quite close together. And maybe it has something more to do with that, and maybe this was a reflection on that, and what this means what it means over there, and so on. There's that blue ware that's there too, and the black ware that goes on. And some of these are intricately scratched. Some of these have a lip on them that comes up. So they've already got these type of concepts, or a belly goblet type of shape versus a regular cup versus this versus that. And a lot of people say, you know, they could have used something like this to cook with very easily because it'll get hot. And so you could have hung up ropes onto it that you wet so they don't get burned in any way off a tripod over a fire and get the stone hot, and it's ended up getting hot enough and cook your stew and things like that going on. So there's a lot of conjecture, and of course now they're going to have to take some of these cups and do swabs to them and end up seeing if they can find any remnants to things that's gone on. And they've got some incredible science that goes along with that that will show up something if it's there. But it's amazing what they did leave, and people didn't leave things for a reason, or not for a reason. Let's say that the other way. And so when you see all these places that are abandoned and covered over, and they left some things that are there, it makes you wonder a whole lot, like what went on here. And it wasn't a takeover by another people, because it makes no sense that they would let you go off to this point of view or this detail of covering up your whole spot. Or did the other people cover up the spot? No, it doesn't look like that either. It really looks like this. Okay, and so they were at a certain age, they were moving on, something happened, da-da-da-da. Hey, look at these semi-uniform beads with a hole in it that are all shown here, and there's a stretch that are shown here, that some are shown with lapis lazuli, some are shown with a weird gray color, and that red string that's gone on there in the bottom. But then all the other ones are done with this lighter white stone that's whiter than any of the stone that they're worked with. People are using a special stone for that as a jewelry point that's going on here. But how many individual necklace chips is that going on? I mean, I'm sure it takes, 30, 50 of them to make a stone necklace, but wow, I mean, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of strings. And apparently they found each of these strings all together. So they're like, this was all strung together, these were all strung together, here's another one. And somebody else calls out from way over here, and they go, I found one too, because there's a few pieces, and yeah, there's more. So it gets to the point that there's a lot of archaeological pieces in here showing that these people had a lot more going on than what we give credit for. And in fact, the whole idea of the way hunter-gatherers turned and all these things and these ideals we had when I was growing up and how it went, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, didn't go like that at all, because we're finding a pre-pottery people with all this going on, but they seem to be the stone people going on. Well, here's the thing. There's no clay right there. But a people that were living around clay started using it as pottery, and they didn't, by the way, have so much stonework that's going on there. Just like Sumerians didn't have much stonework, and they utilized fired bricks and so on, versus the way that Egypt's done. But you can find it started with those fired bricks, because 2 and 2 together became a different letter over here in Egypt than it became in Sumer, to a point. They had stonework, and you can see their incredible stonework that goes on there, but they weren't so reliant on it, because there was a little more clay going on there, things, and the way that went, so a little separate. So you can see these necklaces that are hooked up here, and all these different pieces, real exotic looking too, in different colors, and then they separate them by a certain number of other beads and all that. They've got that going on, real decorative, pretty fancy. And you think of this beadwork as being something just thousands and thousands of years later than this fancy beadwork that you see through that, and you think that, oh, that's about it, huh? No, well, okay, again, here we get to say something like, here's one table they put together of all the strings that they got off of one season, supposedly here, or maybe it's multiple. But off of this site here, and it shows a bunch of different things. And there's some bigger shells that are mixed into that are mixed into certain ones of them, other ones not, and smaller ones and everything. But it looks like there was a whole industry going on, and a lot of this beads going on here. A little bit. So amazing all the things they can find. These are mace heads here with the hole drilled into them in rocks that have been polished off to be a cylinder somewhat. Later they become a little more flattened off, a little more egg-shaped, upside down, this type of idea. But again, here we see necklaces hooked up and all this type of stuff. That some of this was funerary objects for other people. Here's arrow straighteners and mace heads and things like that, taken and made specially out of certain colored stone versus other colored stones for some reason or another. When you look at this place dug into it from the side of it now, it looks like there's this canyon that's here and everything that's all into, but this whole area needs to be taken down a good 20 or 30 foot, and there's the civilization that used to be there, and it's really not evident, but the tallest of walls left a slight ridge in the sand that's above it here, and you can see it, and people have found it and put it together and so on. Looks like pottery shattered, but it's stonework, people, and it looks like it was purposely broken and put with a burial that's there. Why was it broken? There's an Orion symbol at the top. Stone straighteners for arrows right down there at the bottom, by the way. Different ones. They all have a notch that's sliced into them. Here again, we're looking at these wasp-type creatures. A few of the sun symbologies and things along that line. And here's some more fine needles that they found. And hey, if you look at this needle that's here or that one that's there, that almost looks just like the Maui needle, huh? I think there's one other one they view and it even looks more like it, but I think it's just because it's faced the other way and it looks like that because that's the way it was usually shown. But yeah, these little needles and stuff that go on here to clothing and works that go on there and intricate stuff. And yeah, they got a little hole in the end of them too. But some of them look like they were broke at the hole. Like, well, that makes it unusable. Here's again that forest of columns. I guess we can call it that at this point till the people figure out what this is. Who knows? Maybe they're hollow and inside of each one there's a person buried. Crazy things could be afoot at Circle K. But this site is, here's some of the excavators for last season or the season before that's going through this work and taking it down to another level, being real careful and going through it. And here you can see them working a layer below a layer below a layer and down. But they don't have to use those ladders unless they're going straight up out of bottom layer. And here again is that multicolored, almost looks like colored corn, huh? But separated by certain amounts. And of course you can see that the red ones are all done uniform in those ones, like, oh, this one right here, but each white one is done irregular to stand out like a little shiny point. There are even shells that are found here, and someone said, oh yeah, these are shells from the Mediterranean. These are like an Asterius type snail, and it's from the Mediterranean saltwater, and so it shows these people had connections all the way over there. Well, that's not really that far, but connection to that. But then there's that Natufian route thing, and hey, did some of them hang out and decide to stay there? And oh wow, yeah, yeah. So let's continue with a few more of these pictures here because they're quite telling. Some of them were standing out, and I guess the thing that really does stand out is whenever you see the amount of beadworks, stone bowls, and things like that, and it makes you really wonder what they took with them whenever they left, because look at all the stuff they left behind. And these weren't found just in burials and so on like that. And again, there's a bunch of mortars that they found. There's a whole table of mortars, if you will, that they've got going on that showed you all this grain work. So agriculture is already kicking in, and they've tried to turn around and start leaning that way that, well, agriculture apparently goes back a lot more. When I was a kid, it was 3000 BC, then it turned 4, 5, 7. Now it looks like, oh yeah, and then genetics have looked at it and go, you know, they started that milk, being able to take milk the rest of their life and stuff before that even or whatever, and then we found these bread type things and even pieces of bread from much older than these dates. So how long did it go on, and how long did it become pseudo-sedentary? And hey, you know, Ma and Pa out on the prairie, they would have a little farm going on in their thing, but Pa still hunted for things too. And so, or Are we trying to call that not civilization as we know it, or things like that? And you're going to find that people are going to twist on this idea over the next generation or two, probably, and come up with the idea, but we'll never get to hear it. That, yeah, it goes back this far, more than doubling the date that we already had so far. And I think a big kicker is going to be when they find one of these sites or something that has similar type of stuff going on, but whenever they date it, it breaks 20,000 BC. 1820, that's my guess. And if you look at a few places like Kamyana Mohila, there's 22,000 BC showing these guys. And of course, there's a mammoth on the wall and things like that. But you can see in that site all of this archaeoastronomy concepts going on. But they just don't have this dwelling thing going on because it's like a super cave honey beehive into a rock set that these people had and made into this other stuff that's going on there. But people don't look at that side very much. But you know, because it's over there in Russia, Russia knows a lot about it. And they have all these different thoughts that people on this side of the world don't get to hear about very much. You don't really hear anything about it. I should do another video set on Kamyana Mohila and what some of the Soviet guys have presented, and they put it captioned down below it because they want to give you, American version of what he's saying and transpose it there. But in doing so, you're like, wow, so 22,000, and they say something about Inanna, and the script writing looks like, linear, and so how late does that go back? And this one guy deciphered it, and other people have looked at it and they go, well, if what he's saying is true, that makes perfect sense, and it spells out certain things, vowel consonants and so on, and you can see the difference. And so yeah, that makes out a speech, but that's not in this video here. Look at this place, Kortic Tepe. It's amazing. They've only got about, I don't know, 1/6 of it excavated. Again, what's weird about most of these sites is that it appears like once they get dug down into it and find out kind of what's going on just a little bit, they want to leave it about 1/4 done and then put a potato chip tin over the top of it and make it more of a touristy thing, then turn around and go, okay, let's dig one of these out and just see what the stretch of dates is and everything that's going on. You look at Gobekli Tepe, and it literally they've done such a small portion. They talked about that, like, oh, here we go now. We're going to get a bunch of people in the rest of it. And then you come to find out, no, we said we'd stop right now, leave a potato chip, and then we just point at the rest of it and go, don't know what's over there. Isn't that amazing? Well, why don't you dig? Oh, no. Look, there's rock over there too, though. It looks like it. We done this seismic thing, through the ground, that radar penetrating penetrating radar, and there's stuff all over here. Well, why don't y'all do some of it? Well, they are working on one little spot over there. We keep one little group going for the tourist. Okay. I see how this is going to work. Here's another body that's found there. Yeah, it gets down to the point that you go, well, this looks like one of those stone bowls or something. You go, no, that's a jaw, that's a skull, that's this. And whenever they dig it out over here, you can see there's rib cage and everything else that's going on. In fact, here's two people buried right next to each other, and they've got these mace heads and things all hooked up to each other. They're facing the same way. Wonder what's going on here. And of course, it looks like he filmed some part here, and this is just a picture out of it, huh? Another view of it here with people working on the site. You can tell when they find something important, they get some of these people that really know what the hell they're doing, so nothing gets disturbed too much, and they can tabulate it as they go through it. Just looks like a field of little pieces of pillars, but this is all inside buildings and stuff, and then there are other ones hooked up to each other and little walls between it and so on that they're making mention of. Here's them just scouring through an area, going a few inches at a time, but working their way through, and then all of that gets captured up and then sifted back through. That's how they find all these needles in a haystack and all of these type situations. So we're looking down on it here, and you can tell that there's crops right there just next to it. Crops just grown right up to it, but luckily this wasn't growing too well, and these people haven't had the big farm equipment. If they did, they'd just run over this and just chew it all up. But they didn't, so they left that part alone, and this became this unusable thing, which amazingly is kept a part of humanity's history here, and all this stonework that goes on. These are pieces we've seen before and secondary looks at them, and little parts of bowls and some pictures and things like that that are shown here. But Here's some bowls that look extremely like those ones that are found in Egypt much later. And of course, at that time, imagine this thought. At that time, we're like, man, they had it going on a lot more than people thought when we see all those stone bowls. Well, let's take it back to 10,000 BC, and you can see these stone bowls, and you're like, man, it doubles the amount. It's quite amazing and enlightening, and in how the way we had it going on, where the three little pigs work like this, and they're like, that didn't work that way. Not quite. So we've seen this before, and of course it's this quarter-inch thick that's around here. That's what made it be able to crack. But imagine that how old this really is. You can't date stone, so how old could it be? How old are these pits? These certain burials that they got going on here in these spots. They've already got, enough charcoal samples and things like that of hearts and stuff, and it's showing you, yeah, it's 10,500, 10,600, 10,800. It's right in that range there. Really, if you dug it all up, would you get a higher number than that or a lower number? And how far would the time reach and so on? Here's these blade types with a hole that's done into them, and this looks like that thing that makes a whirring noise. Whoo, 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 like a communication device from way back when that you can hear from miles away and stuff. What else could it be used for? Well, it could be pendants that are on necklaces and things like that, but you think the hole would go the other way through so it's set correctly, and they'd be able to figure that out real quick because they're making holes like crazy. But you can see the uniformity of these holes too, and that they're being made. And you look at that and you're like, man, there's a lot of people like the Amerindians and things that weren't making as uniform holes as it looks like people were doing from well before then. But when the Amerindians came over the Americas, it's at best about the time that we're looking at. Somewhere around that time at 10,500, of course, whenever this thing goes on. Look at this amazing. It's art and everything all into one, and you find these bowls. And so there was these ones that they have, but they have these ones that are extremely decorated. And again, so there's a handful out of them that look like they were extra special. And did they pre-break and they had it? Did they take it and have a trash part and everything? What's going to happen out of this skeleton here? Are they going to find any DNA? Can they get in the petrous bone that's in the head right there and get something out of it and figure out what's going on with that? Or how about this burial or that one? How many burials do they have so far? Well, there's a double burial and all these here. I don't